All right, everyone, what's going on? Chris Clark here, GamecockCentral.com. I am not joined today by Wes Mitchell. A little bit of a solo edition going on today as Wes Mitchell takes a little much of their time off. And he gave a shout out, I think it was on our last show, to Bert, who is one of his good buddies and is actually getting married this weekend. So I want to extend another congratulations to Bert. Hope you guys have a great weekend. I'm sure Bert, even though he's getting ready for the most important day of his life, is certainly also listening to this show live because obviously you got to have your priorities in order. So, Bert, hope you're listening. No, in all seriousness, good luck to you and congratulations once again. Man, lots of people in here already. Russ, all up on it, on the join button, on YouTube, breaking down film. Daniel Watts, Kyle Jackson, Craig Godwin, Zachary Pondexter, a lot of our usual, I don't want to say usual suspects, but our usual listeners here. So really appreciate you guys joining for GC Live. We're going to continue breaking down Vanderbilt, which is tomorrow at noon. And we're going to make this one a really interactive show today. We'll probably go about 45 minutes to an hour, just depending on how it goes. But I want to lean on you guys. I want you guys to throw out some questions, guys and girls. If you got any about the Gamecocks, let's do it. Let's hear your questions about, it can be big picture, state of the program. It can be about the Vanderbilt game tomorrow. It can be about recruiting, both in this class and in the future. Anything you guys want to hit on, I'll be more than glad to do it. We are, as always, brought to you by Affordable Medical Equipment, and that is AffordableMedicalUSA.com, home of the Game Day Chair. If you're on YouTube, as I hope you are, watching live, you see up in the top left-hand corner, that is the Game Day Chair. Someone asked yesterday if it was a Lazy Boy. It is not. It is better. Nothing against Lazy Boy. Make sure you check that out. Go to AffordableMedicalUSA.com and search for the Maxi Comfort Cloud with Twilight. If that sounds appealing, it most certainly is. Makes your game day watching experience at home, whether you're watching a home game or an away game, much, much better, much more comfortable. You can also click the link in the description of our YouTube videos to go directly to the Game Day Chair link. And if you're on GamecockCentral.com as well, on our GC Live little story module, click there and you will find a link as well. So again, appreciate all of you guys and girls jumping into the show today. The team, just to give you a quick update, is going to be flying out at about 4 o'clock, I'm told, by actually Steve Fink, the SID, who's done a tremendous job, especially during this pandemic, passing us on some information on the football team, especially when they were at camp, in camp, photos, interviews with Coach Muschamp, setting up media opportunities remotely for us. Really appreciate the job that he and his staff are doing. But they're flying out about 4, and they will actually get there at 4. It is not time travel. They're not going through a Tesseract. That is, of course, because of the time difference. So leaving about 4, flying, arriving in Nashville about 4, and then on Saturday. So at noon, they will be playing Vandy. So let's hit some of your comments, some of your questions. Breaking down film, wants to come on the show and would have filled in for Wesley. Yeah, that could have been fun. We put it together a little bit more last minute this particular time, but appreciate everybody coming on over. Let's see. Nectarius, is Dabo going to Houston? I'm doubtful on that. I don't know. I'm not plugged into the Clemson football program like the guys at TigerIllustrated.com are. Honestly, if I was Dabo, I would ride out Clemson for as long as they would have me. I could see him leaving one day. I do know he mentioned at one point recently that there would be a day when he's not the Clemson coach, which is a pretty obvious statement. But I could see, because of his personality, and we're not going to make this a Clemson show by any means, if he hears for long enough that he can't succeed anywhere but Clemson, I could see him moving on, whether it's in Alabama one day or whether it's NFL one day. A lot of people, the perception of Dabo Swinney is going to be, whether it's fair or unfair, that he wouldn't be an NFL-style coach. I could see him saying, you know what, I'm going to go prove otherwise and see what happens. But I don't really think that would happen. I think he's got it going pretty well there. If I were him, I would stay. making that much money, that much success. That's certainly what I would go with. Breaking Down Film, Rob, thanks for throwing in a question, man. Who's the MVP of the game tomorrow? Good question. I'm going to go with Colin Hill, actually. And, at first I thought maybe Kevin Harris. He's certainly played quite well lately. Vanderbilt's front seven is going to be a tougher challenge. We talked with Chris Lee from VandySports.com yesterday, and he did a really, really good job of breaking down big picture the Vanderbilt football program, but also just some of their personnel. And one thing that he mentioned too is they've been susceptible to some big plays. If you guys go back and look at, some of the box scores and how the plays turned out against Texas A&M and LSU, their first two opponents, first two losses for Vanderbilt, they did give up some chunk plays on the ground and through the air. But the front seven, with a couple pretty good edge rushers, pretty good linebacker play, that's sort of the strength, if you will, of the Vandy defense. And so South Carolina is going to have to play well up front. They are going to have to run the football. They're going to have to keep the ball out of danger, not turn it over for sure. But I think Colin Hill has an opportunity to potentially create some explosive plays. Will we finally see some downfield plays hit? I think there's going to be a possibility of that this year. We know that Vandy's been susceptible to some plays in space. Maybe Shi Smith or another guy has a chance to take the top off that defense if they can get some protection. So a little bit of, I don't know if it's quite out on a limb, but just a little bit of a guess projection. I might go with Colin Hill. Craig Godwin wants to know if I'm wearing a ski mask on Saturday. I don't think so. Too hot for that. And I don't think I'm stealing money from anybody right now. I hope. This show is free, by the way, for anyone listening. We appreciate you watching and listening for sure. If you're listening on the podcast network for GamecockCentral.com, our podcast family, or whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, Periscope, wherever you may be coming from, thanks a lot for joining us. Kyle Foster wants to know, do you see us having as much success running the ball this week as we did last week? I could see that. Florida's front that they saw last week had some athletic guys. They've got some pass rushers. They got some guys on that defensive line that were former 5-stars. You look at Vandy's front. They've got Dio O. I just call him his last name. It's sort of like Albert O from a couple years back at Missouri. I'll butcher his last name. But him and Andre Mintz, who's listed as a linebacker, but is sort of an edge player for them, they can do a good job. But I think there's potentially some success to be had there for South Carolina. You look at what they did. Had a good day on the ground against Florida. Kevin Harris going over 100 yards. Deshaun Fenwick did some good things. Could Jaquandre White get in there this weekend? Again, we've seen some of the chunk plays that Vandy's given up. There's a speed concern that might be in Jaquandre White's wheelhouse. So I sort of wonder about the screen game. Something that Carolina's been working on. Will Muschamp mentioning on Thursday night during his call-in show, Carolina Calls, that they've been close on some plays. And that's something that Wes has actually diagrammed for you guys recently, that they've been very close in the Florida game and the Tennessee game where they were a block away from a negative play to a potential big play. That's the margins we're talking about here. And if they're going to go on and continue to have some success and maybe expand upon that the rest of this season, I think they're going to have to hit some of those plays. So I'd look for some screens this weekend. Run game, it's hard to go even into any SEC game and say, yeah, I think a running back's going to go over 100 yards. I mean, what Kevin Harris did in the swamp, Colin Taylor dropped a stat the other day. Marcus Lattimore is the only other Gamecock since 2000 to go down to the swamp and rush for 100 yards or more. Obviously, Marcus Lattimore with that big 2010 performance, what do you have, 212 yards, I think is what's coming to my mind. So, yeah, certainly a big one there. Josh Metz picks Harris as the MVP. I could see that. If, we had Chris Lee play amateur weatherman yesterday, which consisted of him pulling up his weather.com app. And there was some potential rain that's sort of been back and forth as to what that's going to be. But Harris, I think it would be Hill or Harris if you pick a guy on offense. Josh, I hope you have ordered, by the way, the game day chair already so that you can see if you can stuff a mini fridge underneath it. If you can do that, we will give a live look in one day from your house, which is right down from me, and we can see what's going on there. Gamecock Russ, You guys are really rolling the questions in, which I appreciate. Does Dak Joyner get a few opportunities this weekend? Here's how I'd answer that. I would say yes, but I think it depends on sort of your definition of that. He started the first game, played a bunch of snaps, didn't play as many against Florida because Josh Vann supplanted him in that slot role. But Joyner's had some opportunities. Now, what I mean by definition, have they designed things where they say, all right, Dakereon Joyner is coming to get the ball on a sweep, such as we saw with Shi Smith, both in the past and this season. We saw Shi Smith a couple times on sweeps against Tennessee. Will we see that? I don't know. Will he have opportunities on the field where he's out there running routes and has a chance to get open and be found by Colin Hill? I would say so. How much? I'm sort of curious to see, because I think it's still an ongoing question as to which receivers are going to continue to play or play more. Scott Lawson from YouTube. With a little more breathing room, hopefully against Vandy, who's a young player that may really stand out with more playing time tomorrow? So I think if South Carolina, I assume, Scott, your scenario has South Carolina maybe being up a little bit in the third or fourth quarter where they can work some younger guys in. Here's one question I have. Would we see Ryan Helinski? Let's say South Carolina's up a couple or three scores later in that game. Do we see Ryan Helinski? Do we see Luke Doty? Possibly. I'd be curious if we see more Zaquandre White. When we call him a young guy, I mean, he's a junior college transfer who's also played at FSU for a couple years, redshirt year and a freshman year. Do we see that? For the reasons I outlined earlier, I think possibly so. We could also see more Birch, more Tonka Hemingway, more Zach Pickens. I think, Muschamps mentioned those guys are going to continue to come on anyway, and those guys may play more anyway. But if they can get up a decent amount, and that's exactly what Colton hit on, do you think Helinski could see some snaps? Yeah, I mean, if it's a game in the fourth quarter that's not a one-score game where South Carolina is in the fortunate position of being able to salt it away and you feel pretty good about it, I think we could see Ryan Helinski, and I think that would make a lot of Gamecock fans happy. I certainly think. Rodarius Thomas question from Benjamin Stacks. Derek from Facebook. Appreciate the question, Benjamin. Appreciate you listening. Actually, hey, if you want to go back if you want to go back to yesterday's show, we actually broke down Rodarius Thomas. We looked at some of his film. We probably talked about him for 10, 15 minutes, something like that, answered some questions about him, broke down his film. I'd recommend going back there. But, he's a bigger kid. He's put together well. He runs pretty well for that size. He's only played ball for a couple years, so he's still got a little ways to go. I think he's going to be a guy who's just going to be a more physical receiver. He doesn't have elite measurables in terms of his speed, his athleticism, but a competitive guy who's a hands catcher, has some ball skills. All right, Back in Dino podcast. Let me see if I can find your question because I just lost it. Would it make sense to take Shi off kick return and put another player that's explosive like Joyner and White? I wondered that too. I really wondered preseason if Zaquandre White would be a guy there that gets the possibility. Now, Joyner has been the up returner. He's been the guy that's sort of situated in front of Shi Smith on those returns and either can get, if the ball's kicked to him, he's got an opportunity, or he's out there as a blocker. So he's sort of the second option as a kick returner. He's been there at times. I've thought that, but Shi's really your only guy that has done it in terms of a kick return situation. You do want your better players on special teams a lot of times, especially if you've got offensive questions. You're trying to create field position. You're trying to create some explosive plays. But from what we've seen, and Will Muschamps mentioned this on fair catches, whether or not we agree with it, South Carolina has gone the route of fair catching because they've studied some analytics and they feel like they're going to have a better chance in their current iteration to just start off, with the field position that comes with a fair catch. So now would I like to see Shi Smith have an opportunity to take some out? Potentially. We saw a few kicks that were kicked a little bit shorter where he may have a chance to bring it out, but they've studied that, and that's sort of what they came with. Lynn McClellan, what's Vanderbilt's biggest weakness? Question from YouTube, from Lynn, who is a loyal listener. Really appreciate you, ma'am. I would say, I think Vanderbilt's offense, you look at that group and they're just not very explosive. Derek Mason is a defensive coach. That doesn't mean they're elite on that side of the ball, but Vanderbilt's had trouble putting up points. You look at first week. Let's go back to their first couple games. You look at Texas A&M. That was a very low-scoring game. I think it ended up being 17-12. So Vanderbilt scored a touchdown and whatever it was. They did score a touchdown in that game. I think they got a field goal. They got a safety. That was it. Touchdown, field goal, safety. Their only touchdown of the game came on a very short field. Texas A&M in the second half for A&M, they come out and they score a touchdown. And then I think they're something like fumble, punt, fumble, fumble. I mean, in the second half, the wheels just sort of came off in terms of turning the ball over. And one of those was a short field. Vanderbilt was able to punch it in there. They actually opened that game with a field goal. They also got a safety when A&M committed a personal foul on a punt. They were punting the ball away, and actually they were receiving a punt, committed a personal foul, blindside blocked a guy, and so Vanderbilt got a safety and got the ball back. So just a lot of mistakes for A&M. Then you look at the second game, and Vanderbilt couldn't get much going on LSU. LSU really struggled against Mississippi State in their opener, obviously dropped that game. Maybe that was an aberration against Mike Leach's offense. We'll see. Derek Stingley was back for LSU, but, they managed 7 points in that game throughout the course. So I would say offensively, Chris Lee from VandySports.com outlined this yesterday. Their offensive line, according to PFF, was ranked 128th out of 130 last year, and then they lost some guys off that unit. And Wes joked yesterday, well, maybe that's a good thing. But they've got a lot of questions there. They took one of their defensive linemen, moved him over. They had probably their sixth man, so to speak, off the bench, sort of like Jordan Rhodes is this year for South Carolina. He opted out. So they've got questions there. They got a freshman quarterback in Ken Seals who's got some talent, but he's been up and down. He's turned the ball over, I think, 4 times on interceptions. They have questions at receiver like South Carolina. They are missing Keyshawn Vaughn at running back. So I would say the offense. Josh Metz thinks J.C. Horn's going to get his first interception this weekend. That would certainly be good for the Gamecocks. Turnover margin is going to be, in my opinion, another important thing. That's the way that you let Vandy hang around or score a devastating upset in this game. A&M let Vanderbilt hang around because they turned the ball over so much. They only lost the turnover margin, I think, 3-2. But one of those was in their own territory, led to a Vandy touchdown late in the game, and they had a chance to salt it away. They fumbled the ball. So, first freshman to break into the starting lineup from breaking down film. I don't know if there is a freshman. So, when you think about freshmen that could break into the lineup, you would probably think about I do have an answer. I'd say Rico Powers probably has the best shot to do that. Now, he is playing that X behind Xavier Legette, but if he could continue to make strides, had his first 2 catches for 19 yards against Florida, then maybe they look at him in another position. For me, you look, say, Jordan Birch. You say, well, he needs to play more. Well, he probably will, but is he really taking over J.J. Enibare's spot at Buck? No. Is Aaron Sterling really going to give way to Tonka Hemingway at defensive end? I wouldn't say so. Powers might make the most sense. Even a guy like Eric Shaw, if he continues to come along, really, he missed 8 weeks of camp, OTAs into camp. That's really tough for a true freshman. Is he really coming in and supplanting Nick Muse? I don't think so. I think there are some guys that can certainly continue to make strides and can continue to see their playing time go up throughout the season. But in terms of breaking in the starting lineup, I'm not sure about that. Josh is getting a lot of love today. So his recliner did just break. And so great timing to get the game day chair. Hit the link, check out the game day chair, and let us know what you think. So that sounds like an awesome Christmas present. All right. Colin Taylor making an appearance in the show. First time, long time. Will South Carolina throw to the tight end? I would say yes. They will probably throw to the tight end. Craig Godwin wants to know about a key player for the Gamecocks. Has Jamar Brown being cleared? We don't know quite yet. Last we heard, we're not sure. Jamar Brown's sort of been on a day-to-day basis. Certainly getting him back, I think, would help South Carolina a lot. He's someone that spent early in his career at linebacker and showed some flashes, but is playing that dime position, and I think is a guy that could be really, really valuable. Jalen Brooks, question from Rob. Still haven't heard anything about that. I'm not super. Here's where I'm falling on Jalen Brooks. I'm not super optimistic given the circumstances on it. We have seen some appeals go through for some other guys. The circumstances, of course, on everybody's a lot different. Here's my guess on Brooks, and this is not anything that anybody hasn't said already. My guess is probably the issue that is being run into is that he transferred to Tarleton State for a little bit, a school that was farther away from home even, and now is coming back to South Carolina. Now, from what I know about the situation, it's very valid reasons why he did it, but that's my guess on why it was denied and maybe being held up. You guys are really doing a great job with the questions. Let me take just a second, couple things. All right. Take a little break from questions. So I'm still going to be the only one talking on here, but want to get to more of your questions. This show's free, right? Brought to you by the Game Day Chair. We really appreciate it. Hey, make sure you guys, if you're enjoying the show, check out our content on GamecockCentral.com. During the football season last year, and I think we're pacing about the same this year, we're probably 40 to 50 content pieces every game week, whether it's wrapping up the previous game, whether it's looking ahead to the new game, the forthcoming game. Lots of ball left to play this season. Colin Taylor, Wes Mitchell, myself, Jackson Fields, the whole team, working hard to provide you content day to day. So if you like the show, do us a favor. If you're on YouTube, like, comment as you have been doing, subscribe to our channel, hit the little notification so you'll be notified anytime we go live. And visit GamecockCentral.com, and hey, consider subscribing. If you're on an annual subscription, it's like $0.25 a day is what it comes out to. Help support us, help support the show. And most of our members, a lot of people on here are members. And if any of you got anything nice to say about us, or even if you want to yell at us that our coverage is not good, feel free to do that. But I think our members are pretty happy with it. So consider giving us a look. All right, so back to some more questions. Sort of rapid fire format because you guys are really throwing them out there. Let's see. Lynn had a question again from YouTube. If we win the toss, what are the chances of deferring? I'll say 50-50. No, I'm just kidding. I really don't know. I don't know what the thought process is going to be there. Frederick Cooper from YouTube also, thanks for your question, Frederick. Do you think the game plan will be more run oriented because of the potential weather? Yeah, it could be. I mean, they had some wet ball practices last week, basically dipping the balls in water, trying to deal with that, working on running in dry balls from the sideline when possible so that they're ready for that in game situations, trying to do a good job with that. As I mentioned earlier in the show, Chris Lee from VandySports.com, I asked him about the weather because I know earlier in the week, we know that Missouri LSU, for instance, got moved to Columbia, Missouri. And I know some people had concerns about whether or not the game would be moved. No indication of that. Could be some rain. How much? We'll just have to see. But maybe that's a situation in which, there's a little bit more. But I'd still think we're going to see the ball thrown some. Guys, even you remember the monsoon game with Missouri, the ball's being thrown there too. I mean, some of it was a little out of necessity, but we saw the ball go in the air a lot in that contest, which was really pretty fun. Gamecock Russ, another good questions. The odds that South Carolina scores on their first possession for the third game in a row. Man, I don't know if I'd bet against it. Here's the thing. This type of thing for Mike Bobo, you might look at it and you say, okay, is that an aberration or what? You guys may remember, I can't take credit for this stat because I didn't research it, but I tweeted it out one time at one point last year. was watching LSU in the playoff, and I think this was before their first playoff game. And at that time, LSU had 9 opening drive touchdowns that season out of, I guess, 12, 13 games, whatever it may have been. And that was tied with, drumroll, Colorado State. So Mike Bobo did a really good job at Colorado State of coming out and structuring the offense to where he's putting together a really good script on that first drive, looking at what the defense is going to do, how they're going to defend certain things, throw in some new things at them, some wrinkles, and the guys have executed it the first 2 weeks. Now, they've run into some issues after that, but what we've seen is they've adjusted some as well. You saw against Florida, end of game, we've litigated that over and over, so I don't want to get into that again. But they did score some points in the second half. We saw against Tennessee, they adjusted and scored some points in the second half. So that was a big question with Bobo coming in, that we thought, could he, South Carolina struggled last season for the most part, not in every game, but in a lot of games, second half adjustments. We've seen that from Bobo. We've also seen a really good initial game plan. And it looks like that's something that he's just sort of good at, to be quite frank. And a lot of people we've talked to around that program have been really, really impressed with Mike Bobo and how he structured the offense. Has the offense been elite? No, nobody expected that. But in my view, from what I've seen from this team with the question marks they had, remember, Mike Bobo walked into this situation. The only players he brought over were Colin Hill and Adam Prentice. After he took the job, they decided to leave Colorado State, come over. So he walked into a situation where receiver is a question mark. He walked into a situation where you're replacing basically your entire running back room, and, oh, by the way, you lose Marshawn Lloyd. And I think he's done a really good job of structuring the offense to where they've had some success. Gamecock Russ with another one. Can the Gamecocks get a lot of pressure on Seals, the freshman quarterback from Vandy? I think so. So we've seen them, force Kyle Trask into some mistakes last week, which was a big key. Obviously not enough of them. Not as much week one, although Jarrett Garantano said that he did feel some pressure at times and it caused him to sail some throws in that Tennessee game. I think he's shown that he's been a little bit prone to some mistakes. And Vanderbilt's offensive line, I'm not really sold on as a good group. So the Gamecocks got to get them into some third and long situations, some obvious passing situations, and try to let your guys, tee off there. All right, let's see. Oops, I just messed up scrolling. Ernest Miller is super late to the show. No problem, Ernest. I'm super late getting to your comment here. He believes a run-oriented game plan and good third down defense means a 35-17 Carolina win. Yeah, I mean, if Carolina is having success running the football, if they are getting Vandy into some third and long situations, some obvious passing situations, playing good third down defense, getting off the field, that score line is certainly feasible. Has Prentice been used less than you would have expected? Maybe so. I think, look, here's one thing about Adam Prentice is that we knew South Carolina was probably not going to come out. Like, I didn't expect them to come out 50% of the time in I formation. That's not something I anticipated. Did I think maybe a little bit more? Yeah, maybe. But he's been used some. I think one game I recall, and I can't remember if it was Florida or the last one, or maybe the snap count was similar, but I think 16 to 20 snaps, something like that, for Adam Prentice. So, at Colorado State, I know going back and looking at him there, I think maybe he was involved in the passing game a little bit more. But hey, we're through 2 games. I mean, it might be that Mike Bobo is. When I say saving that, it's not like he's going to break it out as some new trick. I mean, that stuff is on tape, but maybe just structurally what he's seen from each of the defenses the first 2 weeks, he felt like some other personnel groupings were better. It was a question coming in, would South Carolina play more 2 tight end? Would they play more I because you don't feel as good about the receivers? But they've still played, from what we've seen, they've still played a decent amount of 3 wide type stuff. And so, again, got to get better at the receiver position as well. Just my opinion one. Has Bobo been better for y'all? I'm not sure if that's in relation to Georgia or if it's has he been better than what we saw last year? I would certainly say, yeah. I think what we've seen from Mike Bobo the first 2 weeks, again, I went into it earlier, has been pretty impressive. Lynn, thank you so much for your comment about what I referenced earlier, GamecockCentral.com. Very kind of you. She says, join now, you won't be sorry. Best site. Really appreciate your support. And again, there's a testimonial from a current subscriber. Ernest with another question from YouTube. What will be the best confidence booster that we will take from Saturday to use as fuel for the rest of the season? Well, I think, you got to start at the baseline and get a win, right? But I think if South Carolina can go out, win turnover margin, that's something that Will Muschamp's harped on, right? They've got to find a way to get the ball off people. Now, they forced two mistakes from Kyle Trask in an interception that was caused by pressure and a fumble that was caused by a really good play by Tonka Hemingway last week, but they made their fair share of mistakes. So I think confidence boosters, go play a clean game. Play a clean game, get the win, number one, but don't make mistakes. Don't turn the football over and let Vandy hang around. Go win in the trenches. Create some explosive plays and don't allow any explosive plays. So, I mean, that's really a handful of them, but I think if you had to sort of boil it down to just one thing, Ernest, I would say go play a clean game. South Carolina, the first 2 weeks has been there. I don't think anybody, as mad as Gamecock fans are, and that's totally fine to feel that way the first 2 weeks, nobody's looked at those games, and maybe this is why there's so much frustration. Nobody's looked at it and said, boy, they got blown off the field. That didn't happen in either game. Now, Florida looked offensively pretty superior at times, right? With some of their one-on-one matchups, some of the balls they won in the air, some of the individual plays they made. They went up and down the field. They made some explosive plays. But South Carolina, again, they forced a couple turnovers. They acquitted themselves well in a couple drives. Florida's got a good offense. Give up 38 points. That's not something you feel good about, right? But they I think they made a lot of mistakes the first couple weeks. I mean, what have we talked about after each week? We've been talking about mistakes. We've been talking about explosive plays in the secondary. They've got to stabilize things, this week, I think. Wade Burnett on Facebook. Hill's done a decent job at quarterback one. QB1, I'd like to see Helinski or Doty get a shot, maybe see if they can get some other receivers involved. Just my opinion. Receivers still got to get open. Yeah, I think that's the main thing. So Colin Hill, one of the criticisms has been they haven't had a lot of success throwing down the field. Colin Hill, by definition, I think is a little bit more of a safe quarterback in terms of his throws. Guys, I don't know if this is even controversial to say. That's probably a good thing with this team right now. We've thrown out the stats to you guys. 8 throws, I think, downfield, 1 connection over 20 yards is sort of the metric we're using. From what we've seen so far on this team, more downfield throws is probably more incompletions, right? And this is a team that needs to stay on the field. They need to be better on third down. They need to be efficient in the red zone. They need to move the chains. Would we like, would the Gamecocks like more explosive plays? There's no doubt about it, right? But you do have to look around and say, what is the solution? Colin Hill can throw the deep ball. We know it. Now, has he thrown it a lot so far? No. He's taken a more safe approach for sure. I don't know if the answer is to be hard-headed throwing the ball downfield per se. You can still stretch the field with some of your route concepts, which we saw against Tennessee in the second half to open things up. We saw that some against Florida. And at some point, they're going to have to hit on some of those, or people are just going to basically ignore it from a schematic standpoint. Not ignore it, but not going to pay as much attention to it. So I think that's the biggest issue for this team. Trying to be consistent in the run game, which they've been pretty consistent from the second half of Tennessee and into the Florida game. I think they got to do a better job as a team, not just offensive line, but team protection. They got to hit on some of these screens, and they've got to find a downfield presence. Schematically, Mike Bobo's tried to dial some of that stuff up, but it is on the receivers. They've we knew that was a question, guys. We knew it was a question going into the game, and that's really played out. Wade, appreciate your comment also about being able to catch the show. Thanks for tuning in. Hey, if you can't ever watch live, guys and girls, make sure you tune in. Podcast Network. You can go back to YouTube. Check us out there as well. Trey Daniel mentions that the receivers have done a decent job getting open, but the drop passes have killed us. Trey, coming from Facebook. No doubt about it, man. I mean, it's been a difficult thing for South Carolina to sustain. You look at early in that Florida game, I think, what did they have in the game? 6 or 7 drops, maybe 8 drops. That's tough. And are some of them a little bit more of a 50-50 ball? Yeah, but you've got to be able to come down with some of those. Really, the only downfield play that South Carolina has come up with on that 50-50 ball is the Xavier Legette one on the double move. They've got to have more of that, right? Got a question from Facebook from Keith Coons. Is Zach Pickens making a difference when he's been on the field this year? Sounds like he's primed for more PT. His comments suggest he's more comfortable this year with the defensive scheme. Absolutely. Great question, Keith, first of all. Yeah, so Zach is someone that Muschamp has said is working his way into more playing time. He looks good. I mean, so during preseason camp, I was continuing to hear that he was making strides coming along. There's still a feeling inside the program that he's a future potential early round type of NFL guy, and it was the same. I don't want to put the Javon Kinlaw first rounder type thing on him, and they're a different type of player too, but there was a feeling inside the program for Javon Kinlaw early on that if he put it together as he continued to progress, if he developed as he had the potential to, that he could be an early round NFL guy, and we saw that play out. So there's a similar feeling to Zach Pickens. One thing I think we got to remember is in high school, he's a little bit more of an end in high school. He played a lot of running back in high school. So when he gets to college, not only are you adjusting to just playing really talented SEC offensive linemen, but you're also adjusting to playing inside, doing the things that you're asked to do within Will Muschamp's defensive scheme. So it was an adjustment period. I think because he was a 5-star, a lot of people assumed here's a guy that's going to come in and play a lot. But he's playing close to the ball. It's difficult, when you're playing defensive tackle as a freshman. And so he's continued to come along. He's really flashed. And so I think he's going to continue getting more comfortable and coming along there. All right, let's see what else. Trey Daniel on Facebook, going back to the drops. Secure the ball when it hits you in the hands. If you're on scholarship, you should catch the ball. Yeah, that's exactly right. Great point. South Carolina, when you look on this roster, they don't have a lot of the quote unquote jump ball type receivers. Brian Edwards, for example, is a guy that you could count on to win some jump balls in certain situations. You could also throw Brian Edwards a screen and he can run around or through guys, move the chains. He had open field ability. We saw that against Missouri, a little screen play they threw him and he outruns everybody. So he could do a little bit of everything for you, right? Even Dabo Samuel was pretty good with the ball in the air. He was just a jump ball, quote unquote, guy, but could do a lot of those different things. I think when you look at this roster, Shi Smith's not a jump ball guy. He's a space guy, and he's done a really good job the first couple weeks, and Mike Bobo's done a good job of scheming that up. Xavier Legette, to me, is the guy on this roster has the best chance of being that 50-50 ball guy. He has the capability. He's shown it in flashes and spurts, whether it's in practice or in game situations, but he hasn't been as consistent with it. And so trying to develop that consistency is certainly something that they've got to continue to work on. Wade Burnett says that he's been pleasantly surprised with the running game. I didn't expect it to be what it's been so far with Lloyd's injury, but I've been happy with it to this point. Yeah, I mean, Lloyd going down, Lloyd being on the shelf, that created a huge question. Huge question. He's the most dynamic guy on the roster. And so now that's still a question for South Carolina. And that's why I think it would be big if Zaquandre White could continue to progress and come along. They don't have a game breaker at running back like Lloyd could have been. Lloyd can be a short yardage or longer yardage guy for you. Harris is not as much that. Fenwick is not as much that, right? So that's something I think they need. But those guys have played well. Kevin Harris, when he took the corner sometimes against Florida, he looks faster than you'd anticipate. He can run through contact. He showed good vision. Really impressive performance by him, I think, against Florida. Again, first guy since Lattimore since 2000 to go down to the swamp and rush for 100 yards or over. So, that's pretty impressive stuff. I think Mike Bobo's been creative with it, done a lot of stuff in the run game. Kevin's done a really good job too. So let's see. Adam Gabrielli. Wes, I'm not Wes, by the way. I am Chris today, flying solo. What are your thoughts on addressing the poor tackling, especially in the secondary? It seems to have played this since Muschamp arrived. Thoughts? So here's how I say, I know people don't want to hear this because, like, any level of missed tackles is not something you're just saying, well, that's okay. When you play South Carolina's schedule, you're going to have missed tackles. You're going to have them up front. You're going to have them in the linebacker. You're going to have them in the secondary because the skill guys are too good. You don't play Florida. I venture to say nobody's played Florida and hadn't had a handful of missed tackles in the game like ever. It just, it just doesn't happen when you play teams with good skill positions. What you can't have, obviously you want to limit that as much as possible. What you can't have is what you saw in the Kadarius Toney run, where you got 4 guys around him trying to thud him down. Just not something, And I've even seen, they mentioned, Will Muschamp mentioned that they didn't teach that, which obviously they don't. And he mentioned he asked about it during film review the next week. Nobody really had an answer for it. Why did it happen? I don't know. They got to get better in that area for sure. They have missed some key tackles. I think every year you can go and you can turn on the tape, even from really good teams, and you'll see some missed tackles, right? Doesn't mean it's good. I think it's more glaring on plays like that. When you've got an opportunity to get the guy down in a gang tackle situation, that's when you can't afford to miss tackles. Other than that, I think, look, is there some way they could teach tackling better? Maybe so. I mean, a lot of these guys are the same guys that have been teaching tackling in the SEC for a while. They've had really, really good defenses, whether it's Tracy Rocker being a part of a bunch of them, or Rod Wilson coming from the Chiefs, or, Muschamp with what he's done during his career. I do think they're still having some issues with, we've talked about safety play. They need to get better there. Some of it still does go back to recruiting. Is it a combination of recruiting, coaching, whatever? Sure. I mean, it always is at the end of the day. So I think, look, that's the bottom line. You've got to eliminate what we saw on the Toney, run. Some of the one-on-one situations that we saw, against Tennessee, getting out leveraged, things like that. Some stuff they've got to try to get cleaned up there. Toby Burcheat. I hope I didn't butcher your name. I'm sorry. From Facebook, schematically, are you impressed with the different formations that Bobo has shown to get the defense move around? Yeah, I've been impressed with just about everything with Mike Bobo so far. Not to say the offense has been spectacular, but that wasn't expected. I think the question coming in was, when I'm assessing Mike Bobo, it's not what's the personnel look like. We all know that there's some personnel deficiencies that they're going to have to address, specifically at receiver. But to go back to what I said earlier, I'm looking at what does he have to work with, what he walked into, and what has he done with that. And so I think he squeezed out a lot of production, more than I anticipated, I'll be honest, out of this group. And so I've been very impressed with the matchups he's created, with how he's been able to scheme Shi Smith open, with the different formations and movements and things like that he's shown the defense. That is really, it's really been good stuff. Chandler Bruce says Wes is too good for us now after the postseason he's having right now with the Braves. I know, just mashing the ball. Wes Darnode has done a great job. Let me go back here because I think I've missed a couple questions, and I apologize. I haven't gotten to everybody's. You guys have asked a lot of questions today, which I really appreciate, because that is not just me here giving a monologue for the entire show. Steve Quinn from Facebook, how do we match up against Vandy, Kentucky, and Missouri? When I look at those games, Vanderbilt, to be honest here, honesty hour, that was the only game on the schedule, the revamped conference-only schedule going into this year where I said that's a win. The rest of them were like toss-ups or games that South Carolina wouldn't be favored in. So for me, and we're going to continue to learn more about these teams. Kentucky's towards the end of the year. We'll know a good bit about both those teams by the end of the year. You still got to play the game, obviously. But I think Kentucky and Missouri are still a little bit more toss-up games. Missouri's schedule is brutal, right? Kentucky, I think defensively will still be pretty salty. Offensively, they can cause you some issues with a mobile quarterback, an offensive line that can be good. So I think those are still more toss-up games. I think the most favorable matchup is Vanderbilt, which could be said, not trying to pick on Vandy, but they're going to be overmatched from a talent standpoint, especially against most any SEC teams. All right. Appreciate you guys very much for tuning in. I think we might close out. Thank you very much for your comment. Mouth is a little dry. So I've actually been hitting up some green tea here. Whoop, there it is. Not sponsored green tea, but I needed a little caffeine boost as we went into the show. So, all right, y'all, we're going to get ready to close it out. Thanks to everybody for listening. Facebook, YouTube, Periscope. Even if you're listening later as a download on the Gamecock Central Podcast Network, we really appreciate you guys tuning in. Thanks again to Affordable Medical USA for sponsoring the show. Home of the Game Day Chair. Make sure you guys click that link in the description. Check out the Game Day Chair. We may, I don't want to promise it, but obviously this is on a Friday. We may check in on Saturday morning, Wes and myself, or one of us, with you guys early if you want. I'm not sure. We don't want to promise it, but we will look into the possibility of that. Noon kick in Nashville. Team, again, is about to travel at 4 p.m. this afternoon via plane to get to Nashville at 4 p.m. Nashville time, and they will get ready to do their walkthroughs and all that stuff and to play Vandy tomorrow morning. Obviously, key game for the Gamecocks. So you know where to find all the coverage, GamecockCentral.com. If you're on YouTube, like, comment, subscribe, turn on your notifications. Check out GamecockCentral.com and consider subscribing to us there. So thanks so much, everybody, for tuning in.